welcome back to What the Hype podcast, and happy Pride to all of you who celebrate, which should be all of you, even if you're just allies.
Which should be all of you.
Should be all of you. That is a threat. So speaking of Pride, we did want to acknowledge that and celebrate that in our own special way. So this week on What the Hype, we're talking about Netflix's Heartstopper, which is an adaptation of Alice Oseman's graphic novel. I'm here with Andrew and Eric this week. I just realized I didn't introduce myself, but it's Pam. I'm back. Sorry for
everybody knows that voice.
Sick and tired of me. And we also have a special guest this week, right, Andrew?
We do, yes. And I get to intro him because he's my boyfriend. Pat is here. Welcome, Pat, making his What the Hype debut.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited that I get to be in the trifecta world of hype podcasting now. So this is great.
Oh, all through yourself.
Of podcasts.
I get it. Yeah. Well, Pat is on today, not just because he's gay, but also because he is a huge Heartstopper fan. Like huge.
Yes.
So we thought we have to have him on to talk about it because he's probably going to know the TV show and the comics better than anybody.
Yes.
Pat, how many times?
Sitting next to me. So I have all five.
Oh.
So, yes, I love them.
Patiently waiting for the 5th installment.
Yes.
Or the 6th, right?
The 6th installment, yeah.
Yeah, that's the 6th.
How many times have you read the graphic novels and watched the TV show at this point?
So I've only read the 5th one once, but the rest of them probably 4 times. And then the show in this rewatch just to prep for this was probably my 6th time watching both seasons.
Nice.
Is this a comfort watch for you? Is that what it's turned into?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Aww.
It just makes me happy. Almost as much as Great British Bake Off, but it's there. It's up there.
Oh, I thought you were going to say almost as much as me, but it's fine. Baking's good. I get it.
Well, you did fake break up with him on Millennial this week, so
True.
maybe that's merited.
All right.
Well, don't worry about it if you're not a super fan like Pat, because as you probably know by now, our first episodes on What the Hype are always dedicated to introducing you to the fandom so that you can get your bearings straight before you dive right in. And we're going to do that just right now for you all right here. To kick things off, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about what Heartstopper is about. So Heartstopper is a queer British coming-of-age romantic dramedy series, and it is based off of Alice Oseman's webcomic and graphic novel of the same name. And you can read that for free as well, right, Pat?
Yeah, so she has the entire series on both Tumblr and Tapas, which are just 2 blogging sites. Obviously, Tumblr is more famous. There are extra scenes that are not in the actual published versions of the webcomics or of the graphic novels. I have not gone through all of that yet. That is something I will do someday.
Well, the cool thing about this adaptation is that Alice Oseman is actually very heavily involved in the making of the TV show as well, which is why graphic novel fans will probably notice that the show is very true to the comics. She serves as writer and executive producer on the show, and season 1 premiered back in April of 2022. The show centers around Charlie Spring and Nick Nelson, who meet when they end up sitting next to each other in class. And while Charlie is out as gay, Nick is still struggling to figure out his identity. Each season is only 8 episodes long, and each episode is about 30 minutes. So it's a pretty easy binge, to Pat's point about having watched the series through about 6 times now. You too could be like Pat, and it's a pretty low commitment. So it's really easy to get into this if you're, for some reason, if you've missed the boat.
Yeah, and it is very popular. Heartstopper came with a built-in audience of fans who had been avidly reading Oseman's webcomic turned graphic novel series. And fun fact, Nick and Charlie were originally introduced as characters in Oseman's debut novel Solitaire in 2014, which actually centers on Charlie's sister, Tori. So we know Pat has read the graphic novels. Pam and Eric, you haven't yet, right?
This was not on my radar at all until we said we were going to do a What the Hype on it, and I decided to give it a shot. I was thoroughly charmed by the
Oh, I'm so glad to hear
series.
that.
Very charmed. I've watched the first season now, and it's wonderful. So I have not read the graphic novels. Maybe sometime.
Mm-hmm.
I have actually read all of them, and they're really quick to get through, as most graphic novels are. The comic style as well is very charming. If you watch the show and you notice all those little like animations of leaves and flutters and sparks, all of that is part of Oseman's style in terms of what the graphic novels are. And so it's a really easy way to like dive into both worlds. Like there's touchstones on either side, no matter where you start.
I
Love
thought
that.
that was a
Yeah.
really nice touch that even those graphic leaves appeared in the TV show. It was a really cool way to tie the graphic novels and the show together. Pat, tell us about the adaptation more, though. In terms of like graphic novels to seasons, how are they moving along thus far?
Yeah, so the first season is the first two graphic novels, basically in their entirety. Which going like back to reading them, even though they are each about like 300 some pages, it only take you an hour to read because you do go
Wow.
through them so quickly. Like there's maybe like a few frames per page. You just kind of fly through. Um, so there's that. When we get to season two mixes up the third and the fourth graphic novels a bit. It's basically the entirety of the third, and then the fourth, it picks and chooses a little bit of it. I have a feeling that when season three is out this fall, that is going to be the rest of the fourth and probably some, at least, of the fifth installment of the graphic novels.
Okay.
It's fun to speculate, isn't it, about that sort of thing?
Yeah, and the way that the story is going along, I see the reason why. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody.
Sure.
But I do see like the reason for Alice changing up the order a little bit.
Cool.
And speaking of changes, she has made some other changes.
Yeah, so she's combined a few characters here and there to form other ones. There's a couple characters from Solitaire, that original novel based on Tori, where she's taken aspects of those characters and kind of plugged them in to some of these other ones. And she's just able to flesh out the characters a lot more. Like we have um, the lesbian couple in the show, Darcy and I am
Tara.
blanking on her name. Yes. She like is able to elaborate just on their backstories a little more so that we're able to just really see who they are and flesh them out since the graphic novels do focus primarily just on Charlie and Nick. It is nice to be able to see more of like Tao and see more of Elle, especially with Elle
Yeah.
getting more of her backstory.
Oh, it's so great to hear that is the case with the show, because that's something that I love about it early on is it's a whole sort of group of queer coming of age teens that are all friends, and it's really great to kind of see what each of their backstory is and what their relationship is to each other. So I do love the show for that.
Yeah, everyone's kind of gay in the Heartstopper universe.
Well,
Not really,
that's
but
one thing that
almost.
struck me when I first started watching.
And I liked how, I mean, the one sort of straight character of Tao is like maybe the worst off in terms of like he's kind of a mess. He has a crisis in season one. But you know, it's just everybody's going through it. It feels very real. It feels very grounded. Nothing is over dramatic. I really love it.
Yeah. So I think, needless to say, Pat, you would recommend the graphic novels to anybody who was interested in
100%.
diving into this fandom. You said reading one graphic novel in the series takes an hour?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, they're
so
really
that's
quick. Like,
super easy.
yeah, even like reading it for the first time too. Like I just read, I've had the fifth one and I've been putting off reading it. But I did just read it last night. The fifth one, first time reading and taking in all the pictures, all the art and everything, still just an hour.
Wow.
Why have you been avoiding reading it? You don't want it to end?
I don't want it to end. The fourth one is a little heavy. So that I was a little bit like afraid of where it would put me emotionally. So that was a little bit of it too.
I get that.
Yeah, I would check trigger warnings for sure for the fourth one. I would agree with that.
Uh-oh.
I wasn't expecting it to go there, and then when it did, I was like, "Oh, this actually makes a lot of sense."
Yes.
But it is really heavy.
Oh, okay. Well, that aside, what I've really enjoyed about Heartstopper is that it is a feel good series. It's very colorful. Pam mentioned uh, the graphics, the leaf graphics falling when they kiss and sparks flying and stuff like that. I love that it is very loyal to the graphic novels. I really appreciate a solid book to film or TV adaptation. And I would also say it's relatively less dramatic. I didn't know about Volume 5, but from what I've seen so
Yeah,
far,
right.
it's relatively less dramatic than some other LGBTQ plus stories that we see on television and in film. And I think because of that, it's trying to reach a wider range audience. Whereas some queer stories, they seem like they're very targeted towards mainly adults. I mean, the first queer series I watched was Queer as Folk, and that is definitely not for children. And that
Yeah.
Not
was
at all.
my introduction to the gay world. And I was like, wow, it's just sex, drugs, and rock and roll out there. But Heartstopper, it paints a very different picture and arguably a more accurate picture, especially in present day. So I really appreciate that. I mean, I would call this a family show. I think it's a good family show.
Well, it's
Yeah.
crucial that there's queer joy. The characters are allowed to have joy. It's not nobody's dying of cancer every other episode. Like it feels like so often the queer narratives that I've been exposed to have ended horribly. And there's
Mm.
so much suffering. And these characters are far from perfect. The narrative is far from perfect. But watching the show, even in the first season, I kept catastrophizing, going, what's going to happen in this scene? They're getting together. They might kiss, but like, who's going to walk in on them and then absolutely out them to everybody? And then it doesn't happen. My worst fears don't happen. And it's such a relief. It's such a relief that there are genuinely touching moments that these characters are allowed to have and give it space. The relationship, again, far from perfect, but it feels so real. It's so heartfelt, and it's so happy to watch them smile at each other and say hi.
That is the sweetest part. This is, I mean, the queer experience is not my lived experience, but I have a lot of friends who are. And from what I've heard, a lot of these stories that Hollywood pumps out are rooted, to your point, Eric, in like tragedy in a way. Like it always has to include a lot of pain. And sometimes the pain doesn't even get soothed at all. And so it is nice that even though Heartstopper doesn't shy away from exploring parts of that, at the end of the day, it is still a feel good coming out story, right? Like we know, for example, that Charlie is out because he gets outed. And that's not great. Everybody should be allowed to come out on their own and in their own time. But he has a really good support system. And that's not something that you often see. I think the only other recent television show that hasn't really featured a gay love story that's rooted in pain or like a bunch of homophobia is Schitt's Creek. And I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people have similarly said what you said, Eric, about this is that they kept waiting for the shoe to drop and then it didn't happen. Like there was never a moment in Schitt's Creek where those two characters had to suffer. And we need stuff like that too. And I
Yeah,
totally understand that because I can't imagine like going through life and only seeing like romance stories that end in tragedy in some way. That would kill
Yep.
me.
Yeah, and so many of the stories, at least when it comes from like the gay perspective, are based in like the 90s, where every single story, fail stop, because I think it's easy to fall back on, goes into the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, I think all of us now are in a space where it's not like we're beyond that, but that story is so easy to fall into. And we just want something happy. Like, I think this show truly embodies the whole It Gets Better movement from a decade and a half ago. Like,
Hmm.
this is on the better side of it.
Yeah. And to that point, I think in some ways I understand. I actually just, this is not really Heartstopper related, but I'm a really big Chapel Roan fan. And so I'm on Chapel Roan TikTok right now, as everybody probably is because she's been blowing up lately. But they were talking about this older man who was really getting down to Pink Pony Club at one of her concerts. And people were talking about how emotional it is because the reason you don't often see a lot of older gay men is because a lot of them
Are
did die
gone.
as a result of the AIDS epidemic. So I think perhaps the reason why a lot of these Hollywood depictions of gay love do end in tragedy is because the people that are greenlighting that's like kind of all they knew for a while. So it really is refreshing to see that, we're kind of turning over a new leaf, and there can be stories for all of you that need that representation to feel joy.
There's a perfect moment in season 1. I think it's Elle and Tower looking to watch a movie, and the options are Brokeback Mountain or Moonlight. And I think Elle is like, that's so sad. It's so depressing. Like, yeah, and I've seen both. Moonlight is wonderful, but Brokeback Mountain, I mean, it's just about how being gay ruins their lives and their marriages and all of their relationships around them. I'm like, this is not inspiring. The show yearns to be what those queer films are not. I think.
I have to admit, like, one of my goals here is to get personal on what the hype from time to time, as we have already with our episode on fitting pop culture into your life. And Pat, I do have to ask you, you are so into Heartstopper, and I'm happy for you, but I can't help but wonder if you're so into this love story because something is missing from our love story.
I hope what's going on here on this question. Pat, did you know this question was coming? This is on the spot here.
No, nothing is missing. I just
oh, thank God.
I adore these characters so much, and I think a big reason of that is because I see myself in both of them. Like, I have lived experiences that both of them have had. Just like when it comes to Nick, like, I did sports. I grew up on a farm, like, kind of having to be the manly type person that people like wouldn't necessarily think was gay. But then at the same time, like with Charlie, I've had some of the same like mental health things that he does, like with depression and like things like that, like, so, and definitely anxiety. So like I can relate to both of them on such deep levels. And like we've talked about, it's such a happy show. Like, even me rewatching it over this past week, like, I'm sitting there like happy crying, like legit tears just gushing, even though I've seen it so many times. I know exactly what's coming, but I feel so happy for these characters most of the time.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. It is a feel-good show. You can't help but feel warm and fuzzy when you watch it. So if anybody
needs, I was just going to say, he needed you to sidle up more and say hi to him. Like, more than you do.
He needs you to join the rugby team, Andrew.
Well, we're going to cry a little bit more over Heartstopper and Andrew and Pat's adorable love story, and we'll be back with more chatter for you guys in a sec.
In that ad break, I also just canceled the couples therapy that I thought I needed to schedule. So
the emergency session. Yeah.
Concerns over the love for Heartstopper.
Well, we talked a little bit about what it was that pulled us into this story, but I wanted to make sure everybody got what they needed to say out. I think it kind of seems like what really drew us in was the characters, right? And the character development. I think that seems to be a running theme so far.
That and the soundtrack. For sure. I think even in the first episode, it's Wolf Alice, Don't Delete the Kisses plays, and I love that song. There's so many good
Shura's
tracks
in there. I love Shura a lot.
Yeah, there's so many good songs, and they're regardless of gender, so a lot of them will be like, there's like Sappho's in there. There's going to be a lot of like just I love you songs, and it's so applicable to the moment. And you're just like, this is wonderful. This is perfect for this. And definitely that. I think every actor is well cast. And the full view of the characters is really endearing.
Yeah. And you know what's really funny? I think Pat will agree with me here too. If you pick up the graphic novels, it's crazy how much, like, I know that it's a very like rudimentary art style. It's crazy how much who they cast looks like the drawings. Down to like the fluffy hair for Tao and stuff like that. It just looks like they came right off the page. It's insane.
Yeah. And speaking of the music, like, I'm obsessed. Whoever is the music coordinator for this show is an absolute genius. Like, I love, like, the past 2 years, my Spotify Wrapped has been mostly Heartstopper stuff, because Spotify has great playlists where literally all the songs in order for both seasons. So you can just kind of relive the show as you're listening to it as well.
Oh,
It's brought me on to Baby Queen, who has exploded since this show has been on, because Baby Queen was one of Alice's like favorite artists. Now I think she's touring with Cyndi Lauper this year. Baby Queen is like,
whoa.
she's huge now, and her music is great. Um, it's that's all I listen to when I can't think, like if I want to be out of my pop punk emo phase, like I go to Heartstopper. That's basically like
Andrew,
my
I
life
see
at
why
this
you were
point.
concerned. I get it now.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Punk, Heartstopper music, which is kind of, it's good music, but it's also kind of downbeat. Some songs are. It's kind of the point where I hear some of the Heartstopper soundtrack play, and I'm like, this is from Heartstopper, isn't it? It's just a certain vibe you get from the songs.
It's indie pop. It's
Yeah.
sad bop, indie pop.
Yeah.
Sad girl pop. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to know, because, we have a very diverse queer panel here today, if there were any aspects of the characters' experiences that you all found particularly authentic or that resonated with you. Like, is this good queer rep?
I think so. I think it covers, so
Mm-hmm.
many. I mean, we have gay, lesbian, transgender, bi, non-binary, asexual. Like, it covers the gamut of like at least having one person representing someone.
Yeah. I have like a specific situation, but
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of moments throughout the first season, which is the season I've watched, really stood out to me. A lot of the lessons they're learning, a lot of what the show is showing are things that I've come to over time. But no, there's a moment, it's Charlie's birthday bowling party. And Nick is there, but has also agreed to another commitment. And when I tell you, like, I was pretty much screaming internally to watch Nick navigate sort of this moment, because he's somewhere that he wants to be genuinely, but also has a commitment to be somewhere where he feels he has to be. And I, in real life, tried to do both and failed miserably. And watching Nick not make the mistake that I have made, it was really heartening, and just like, I fully get it. He felt like a real person to me, and he felt like me. So I was very moved by sort of that episode and all the episodes, honestly. But
that's great. Speaking of specific scenes, and I'll call out a specific character, Nick's mom, played by Olivia Colman, who unfortunately will not be in the next season due to scheduling issues, she said. But she is so supportive to Nick when he finally comes out. And I thought it was so sweet because it shows you, maybe, let's say, younger viewers, that if you've been in the closet and you've been really worried about coming out of the closet, you can see the scene in which Nick gets nothing but unconditional love and support from his mom. And that just feels good to see and, of course, receive, especially after you've been so stressed about coming out to family. And Olivia Colman, everybody wants Olivia Colman as their mom. It's like, she's just like a lovely person. So I would like to come out to Olivia Colman for fun one day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I cried.
looking at like background interviews and stuff, her talking about that scene specifically is so heartwarming. Like, we all know she's an amazing person. So if you go and just look at that interview, you'll fall in love with her even more.
That's something else about the show that I think is not only a good, but a crucial portrayal of the LGBTQ community. Every character's parents support them. Full stop. Without question. Charlie's dad, who's in the picture in season 1, Nick's mom, I think Tao's mom supports Elle whenever she comes over. It is so crucial. Their lives are not perfect, like I said, and they do get shamed or bullied at school by peers, but everyone's parents are on the level. They understand how important it is to support their kids, and they want them to be happy. I can't think of how many times Charlie's dad dropped him off at something and really let him know, hey, if something goes south, call me. Like, how meaningful that is, and how involved and not involved they are in their kids' lives seems like the perfect balance. They care about their kids.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. One thing I wanted to bring up, and I guess this is a good place to do it because, we also see these characters are surrounded by people that really care for them too, in terms of like their friend groups and even like the teachers at the school. But something that jumped out to me when I was rewatching to prep for this show is kind of like how harsh Tao is a little bit in terms of like trying to get Charlie to stop having feelings for Nick. And on one hand, I understand that he's just being a protective friend because he's probably seen how awful it was for his friend prior to this point, right? But like, did that strike anybody else here at all, or was that just me?
No, I think by episode 3, I was thinking, oh, Tao's actually the one who's in the worst shape mentally. I really thought that. I thought it was bold for a show to have LGBT characters with issues, and the straight one is the one that is actually unraveling before our eyes. That was my impression of it, and I'm glad that to the point where I've seen in the show, I mean, Charlie and Tao have had a talk, and it really seems like that's being reined in. But yeah, I mean, with any friendship shakeup, what I appreciated about the Tao character was that he was torn between the past and the future. And how do you look forward to the future if you feel more alone? And a lot of these characters have a lot of self-doubt. So I did ultimately empathize with Tao, and I do find him hilarious. But there's some very deep stuff that's going on with him that I bet the show will continue to prod at.
I guess Tal's just trying to be a protective friend, and there has to be some conflict somewhere. So I suppose that's where that is coming from.
For sure. I'm just thinking about like anytime my friend tells me they have a crush, I'm just like, yeah, I'm manifesting that for you so hard. I hope it works out.
Aw,
he's jealous.
But what will this do for me? How will this affect me?
Yeah, but I get that like teenagers feel things so much bigger than we do after we develop as adults, and at the
especially
core of things,
first love.
Yeah, and I know
crush.
At the core of it too, he's just worried about all of his friends drifting, and he's trying so hard to be the glue. So it makes sense. Well, I know that we've talked a lot about the praise and how much Heartstopper is worthy of praise, but I just wanted to ask if there was any instance in which the show missteps, and it's okay if the answer is no for you all. I just feel like we would be remiss not to ask.
Like for myself personally, I don't think the show missteps in a lot of places. There are parts where, like, I think more so for the graphic novels, since I am more like up with that since I just finished reading them again. There are times where I'm like, okay, teenagers don't talk like that. This is very like therapy speak, which is great. Like, I think that is very much needed for the show, especially with the things that they're going through. But there are moments where I'm like, okay, well, a teen just doesn't talk like that. But I get it. I get why it's being said for the age group that it's being like geared to. Like, they need to hear that kind of stuff, especially if they, like, let's say there is a queer teenager watching this who's like in, I don't know, Alabama, and their family won't let them, or they're too afraid to come out. They need to hear that if they aren't able to get to therapy in some way. Like,
so it's like an after school special.
Kind of, yeah. Like, they can get it in a way that doesn't put them in jeopardy with their family or their community.
A lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm trying to share any complaints, is that sometimes it is too positive. It is good that is there, but sometimes it's like this is
like strike a little more fear into the youth.
I did not have this. I did not have this feeling, Andrew. I did not personally.
Well, that is kind of my mild concern, Pam. Like, give them a little bit of fear, because it is a hard world they're still coming into. Things have progressed tons over the past few decades, but there's still battles being fought every day in the queer community, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. But all things considered, I'm very happy with this show, and that it is a feel-good show. I think we do need this.
I wasn't entirely clear what Tori's relationship was to Charlie. She just kind of showed up in his room once or twice, like most of the season. Obviously that wouldn't have been a problem in the graphic novel. But I think it's like the 7th episode or so. She shows up when he's contemplating something. He's just like, you just showed up out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, they know that Tori just does that. And they clarified the relationship. And I was like, okay, this is great.
They do give her a little more to do in season 2, if I remember
that's
correctly.
good. Yeah,
So,
because I ultimately do want to, and I know there's a sibling and a parent of Nick's that I haven't met yet, according to episode summaries. But so I did peek ahead a little bit. But yeah, I, for the most part, am really pleased with the amount of time spent with the various sort of ensemble characters. The only thing that I would say that like is misdone or like kind of gets at me, it's not the relentless positivity, but it is kind of whenever you see Nick and Charlie take a leap, but then the next episode, it kind of takes them back a little bit. Like specifically in season 1, there's this talk about like telling each of their friends that they're dating. And like, even at the end of the show, you know, there's a very public scene where they could be seen holding hands. And the next like scene or two, they're talking about whether or not they should announce their relationship. And it's like, you guys just did. You're like, nobody questions it anymore. Like we're still on whether you're boyfriend or girlfriend or not. It just, that stuff boggled me when I was in high school, and it boggles me now. Official, unofficial, boyfriend, not dating, seeing each other, partners, whatever. So maybe I'm just inclined to think that it's all sort of nonsensical or whatever, but it matters to the characters, so it does matter to me.
Conflict. They gotta find it somewhere.
Well, and I was going to say too, like, even though the show is so positive, outside of the show, there has been some toxicity, and not with people who you would think. Like, it's not towards, or it's not coming from people who are anti LGBTQ plus. Like, it's not that, it's from the fans themselves are being a little toxic. Like with Kit Connor, who plays Nick Nelson, he was basically like forced to come out as bi, just like his character, by the fans, because everybody was speculating and they're like, oh my God, he's hot. He has to be gay, like all of this. And basically, like, he finally broke down on Twitter, maybe like a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago, and was like, hey, y'all, clearly you're not getting the message of the show, but I'm bi. That's it. And like just left it as that.
Yeah, it was really sad. His tweet was, I'm bi. Congrats for forcing an 18-year-old to out himself. I think some of you missed the point of the show. Bye. It's heartbreaking to read a message like that. Clearly, he was very frustrated by what had transpired. I can't
imagine the amount of like DMs and stuff that he was getting, because like he wasn't in much before this. Like he played young Elton John in that movie about him, and like was really in not much else. This was his first bigger role. So you're getting all of this attention right away because of how like much of a phenomenon this was, that all these people,
they were accusing him of, or the show of like queer baiting, or like
they were accusing him of queer baiting specifically, which like, I mean, that's a bigger conversation, but you can't really like, I don't think like a person can really be accused of queer baiting. The writers could queer bait, but a person is nuanced. And it's so silly to me that the internet, and especially fandom, the way fandom operates is that, first of all, like, they preach that everybody should be able to come out in their own time, but then they demand answers with regards to people's sexuality. Yeah. And instead of accepting that no confirmation either way still means that that person could be queer and just not ready to publicly announce it, they automatically assume that no confirmation means that they're straight and they're queer baiting. And it's really dumb because it's not. And also, like, you know, a lot of this started because he got cast in another adaptation. It's a rom-com. I think it's called The Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow. And I guess he was seen out with that actress, and they were like, you see, he's straight. He's just another straight guy that's like taking away gay roles. And it's like, bi people exist, y'all. Like you can like, well, there are a lot of people that
there's not enough drama on the show. They need to create it in real life with the cast. They
Well, like, you think about it, like, I didn't come out to myself or to the public until I was 19. So, like he said, like he was still figuring himself out. He's only 18 years old when he was forced to come out, basically. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to figure that out, and it's
Speaking
so
of
frustrating that the fandom itself was toxic about a show that is so positive.
Yes.
Speaking of fandom drama, this crosses over between Heartstopper and Harry Potter. I'll share it real briefly. Sebastian Croft plays Ben Hope, the bully, in Heartstopper. Sebastian Croft also voiced
that's
the
right.
lead character in Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy, the video game that came out last year. He got a lot of backlash for taking that role in the Harry Potter video game because people are saying, how could you, when J.K. Rowling, she's transphobic and all that. Now, the concerns over J.K. Rowling are valid, but Sebastian Croft is just looking to make some coin, and he got offered a sick role in the big Harry Potter video game. Nobody should be shaming an up-and-coming actor for taking a role in a Harry Potter video game, in my opinion. But he got attacked for that too. And maybe the attacks were harsher because he was in this queer series. But I was not happy that he was facing, and he felt like he had to apologize for taking the role.
And like he's done so, I follow him on Instagram. He's hilarious and just really funny, anyways. But he does so much on the outside too. Like he started a charity where they release shirts of like two dinosaurs with long necks, like hugging each other, and it says like "queer was always here." Basically, like, look, dinosaurs were even gay, so like it's always been around. Like. I love that he's like so positive with that kind of stuff. But I think all these people that were attacking him too aren't looking at all the other stuff that he's doing. But he's an actor. He's getting work, like booked and blessed. That's a whole thing that they always say.
Hollywood's cutthroat.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. I think that people assume that nowadays you could come out and still have a successful Hollywood career. The truth of the matter is it doesn't always work out that way for people, especially people early on in their career. I do not, blame anybody that's young and still up and coming for not wanting to define themselves one way or the other.
Yeah, the show just deals with that so much. And it even says, I think, during the Tara storyline, like how important it is to control your own narrative. You have the right to come out on your own terms, and it's okay to not know something about yourself.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so we're having a great discussion here, and we will wrap up this discussion in a moment, just after this break. We'll be right back.
Well, speaking of narratives on the show, I wanted to look forward here because a new season of Heartstopper is coming out this October. And I wanted to know what everybody's like little wish lists are for what they're hoping to see. Eric, I know you've just seen season 1, but you can still chime in here and let us know what you might want to see in forthcoming seasons as well.
Yeah, I mean, is graduation on the table eventually? I think they're year 10 and year 11 in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably they'd be getting on with their lives. I want to see what sort of sunny, optimistic outlook the show that has not so far dealt with the COVID pandemic has on the job market. I want to see what happens. What are these kids going to do when they grow up? What are they doing for work? Can people get jobs? Are their interviewers going to call them back? Maybe I'm projecting because I'm on a job hunt, but I just want to see how long this feel-good positivity lasts when they grow up and have to face the real world and not their sheltered school lives.
That's a
to
good
Andrew's point about more darkness.
Yeah.
I don't mean more darkness. Give me the optimistic version of the job market, please. I'm begging
volume
you.
6 of Heartstopper, the comic series, is going to be the last one. But I could see Netflix, and maybe Alice Oseman will change her mind, but I could see Netflix trying to take this further into adulthood. I mean, these kids are still quite young. There's so much more story they could tell.
She has said that they aren't. She said that she can tell their whole story in 2 more seasons. And that is all that there will be. So now...
would that be season 3 and season 4, or season 4 and season 5?
Season 3 and 4.
Okay.
So I only saw this just because the end of the 5th one gives you like a calendar of what the timeline is. So from the beginning of season 1 to where we are at the end of at the end of volume 5 is only a year and a half. So
That's
that's all
helpful.
they're going through. And then there is a spin-off like novella called Nick and Charlie, which is Nick's first year at university.
Oh,
So that would take place in the following year. So it's really, I think the whole series itself will only cover about like 2.5 years.
okay.
So, Pat, as somebody who's so well versed, what spoiler-free elements do you think listeners and viewers should be expecting in Heartstopper? And then what are you hoping to see more of going forward? Do you have anything?
It's really hard to say without having spoilers. It does, like I did say a little bit before, it does go into more mental health like talk. So I really, really hope that they pull that off in a way that doesn't make people feel like they can't talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, just like personally with my own anxiety, it took so long to be able to talk about it and admit it to myself. So I hope that this show is able to like get teens or even adults our age, like, it's okay to talk about it. Please talk about it. It's going to be
Talking
better
more
for
about
you
their mental
eventually.
health.
Yeah.
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 And to that point, there is one aspect that, as much as it like it makes me feel like there's like a dead weight in my stomach, I am looking forward to seeing how they tackle that, because it's a subject that I think Hollywood and the media very rarely portrays well. But Heartstopper has a good track record, so I'm really
It does.
looking forward to seeing how they tackle that. Personally,
And I think if they keep the, like, I didn't mention before, but so many pages of the graphic novel are frame for frame, word for word shot for the show. Like, so
Wow.
if they continue to do that in those scenes that are so important, if they do the exact same thing with adapting them, it will be successfully done then. I have high
Wow.
confidence in that.
well, I think we can all agree here that we think Heartstopper is worth the hype. But in case anybody listening is still maybe on the fence for whatever reason, why do y'all think they should give this a shot?
Don't you like joy? Don't you like happiness? Don't you like loyal adaptations? In some ways, it is a standard queer coming of age romance, but between the diverse cast, the overall feel good atmosphere that you get here versus other queer content, and then you throw on 10 extra heapings of cute, it is an original show that I think everybody, queer or not, should be watching, because it's we all need feel good shows, and this is a feel good show that's easy to get through. 30-minute episodes, 8-episode seasons.
Yes. I second all of that. And if you don't watch it, you're homophobic, and I don't make the ruls.
He's allowed to say that during Pride Month. Any other month, that's a little too much.
um, I have said this earlier, but I found so many things in the first season alone that are so relevant to my life. There's wisdom, relatable emotions across all the characters. I would say it's essential viewing, honestly, for people. There's so much going on in addition to the feel-good love story that it feels, it feels important.
It is important, and it's important because younger generations can watch this series and read these novels and know that it gets better. It can get better. It will get better. You will probably feel inspired to live your true self after seeing this if you are currently in the closet.
There's people out there that are ready to love you too. I think that that's really what's at the heart of this,
Ooh.
right?
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we couldn't have done this episode without you, especially knowing how big of a fan you are.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I will
welcome.
always talk about Heartstopper, so I'm ready.
Did you want to let people know where they can find you online if they want to go hang out with you?
Sure. I am on all the social medias. My handle is trick_Finn. Last part of my first name, first part of my last name.
I'm sure
So
he
yeah,
will be
I'm everywhere.
posting about Heartstopper on Threads this October when it comes out.
Yes.
So
anytime I see news on Instagram, I reshare it to my story. Alice
There you
was
go.
just watching it and like in the editing bay for this new season, like this past week. So Yeah.
That's
The
exciting.
official
Okay.
Heartstopper correspondent.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So thank you to all who've listened to our first episode on Heartstopper. We are a new show, so we do need your support. You can do this in a myriad of ways, but first and foremost, please follow us in your podcast app and also consider leaving us a review. It's really going to help make the show a success and find an even wider audience than we've ever had before, which we're ambitious about. And it's also really important now versus later because we're new, just starting out and really looking to reach more people.
Yeah, and thank you to those who have submitted reviews. Kyle said, after listening to these hosts' other show, MuggleCast, for 19 years, so thrilled to hear their takes on more general pop culture phenomenon with such a great panel format.
And Renee says, really enjoyed these first couple episodes and just know that this will be an excellent show. After listening to these hosts for literal decades, I just know the show will continue to keep the bar high for podcasting.
Aw.
Great personalities, smooth conversation transitions, a sense of humor, and so well researched and edited.
Aw, thank you,
That's really
Renee.
sweet. Also
and
makes me feel
Kyle,
old.
and everybody else who's left a review. We appreciate that.
Literal decades.
Literal
Spam.
decades.
Literal
Yes.
decades.
Literal decades.
I feel that in my creaky, dusty bones.
Now that I've been on, I'll leave a review for you guys.
Oh, okay.
Aw.
Thank you so much.
Okay. That latest guest was hot.
The Heartstopper episode was amazing.
More Pat.
Listeners, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Instagram as What the Hype Podcast. And our website is whatthehypepodcast.com. On X, we are What the Hype Show. And if you want to email us about anything, you can drop us a line at whatthehypepodcast@gmail.com. And there is also a contact form and the option to leave a voicemail through whatthehypepodcast.com.
And you know a friend or family member who's obsessed with Heartstopper? If you do, be sure to share this episode with them and tell them we're walking through every aspect of pop culture each week. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for listening, y'all.
That's the hype.
That's the hype.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.